Good morning, this is Josh here at Mass Gunworks. It is a bitterly cold, snowy day. Took some time to come out here in the shop and work on a scope mount on a Savage Axis. I think I've already done a video about the rifle. I wanted to go ahead and cover some things about scope mounting. I know that when I was first getting started with messing around with guns and putting optics on them, there was this misconception that I had that all you had to do is just drop the thing on there and everything would be fine. Excuse me. The one thing I've learned over the years is there's a couple different heights of scope mounts. So there's a what they call a low, medium, and a high-rise scope mount, like the rings, and they're just different heights. And the low is going to allow you to get the scope obviously down pretty low to the barrel. It's typically a little more comfortable for smaller frame people to shoot, especially if like the comb on the back of your stock. And when I say the comb, I mean this part right here where your cheek rests. Okay, if the comb on your stock is a little bit lower, you're probably going to do better with a low rise set of rings. Now some of these, like an AR-15 for instance, I've found that pretty typically like a medium to high rise size scope ring is going to work best on those. The biggest thing that you have to watch is you don't want the front of the scope contacting the base that it sits on or the barrel, because that'll cause issues with your accuracy. You can put a bend, a very, very slight, imperceivable bend in the scope tube, and it's not good. So ideally, the only contact that you want the scope having with the rifle is the portion that sits in the rings. So right here and right here, that's the only 2 points of contact. You don't want any contact up here. Okay, so I ran into a bit of an interesting problem with this one. The first thing was the bases that the rings sit upon were too far apart for me to properly install this scope and create enough eye relief. So I ordered a Picatinny rail from a company called Evolution Gunworks. They make great stuff. You can check them out at www.egwguns.com. They make scope mounts in-house for a lot of different brands, Savage, Tika, Remington. They got a whole catalog. Pretty reasonable price. They also sell rings, and their rings, something that's kind of become an industry standard with the rings is they're starting to laser etch or somehow mark the torque spec on the rings, which is very helpful because you want to make sure you get stuff tightened down properly and not over tight or too loose. So anyway, the issue that we were running into, and I'm going to try and backlight this with the light of the outside, but I've got it set to where the front of the scope is not touching the base, so don't be deceived by the camera angle. But as you can see, that Picatinny is like a block and a notch, okay? And as we get up toward the front, that creates a big problem, especially if you're trying to adjust for eye relief, all right? So what I ended up having to do was take a file. I don't know if you can see it real well, but I basically had to file a ramp on that front and file down Picatinny a little bit to where that scope would properly sit, okay, without contacting anything, and allow me to get the eye relief I wanted. When you go to set eye relief on a scope, it's easiest to do it with two people. You can do it by yourself, but it's easiest to do it with two people. This one's got a bipod on it, so it was a little simpler, but your best bet is to gently hold the stock and the action in a vise and get it level. So you want the action level, and if you've got a Picatinny rail, you just take a little bubble level like this, okay? And those come in those kits that you get from mounting like TV mounts and stereos and stuff. You take one of those, you set it across the Picatinny, and you get it level, left to right. And it's a good idea to also get it leveled front and back as well. That way your bubble's as accurate as possible. But you're going to take your scope, set it in your rings, get your rings tightened down, and you want to move that scope back and forth in the rings, okay? And you want to do this with the scope set at the highest power. So this is a 3 to 9, so I'm going to turn it all the way up to 9 power, and I'm going to move that scope back and forth. Now, as you do that, you're going to notice that there's a black shadow, okay, and your field of view kind of starts getting smaller. That's called a scope shadow. So the idea is to get the scope on its highest power close enough to your eye that that scope shadow is right at the outside of your field of view or just disappeared, okay? Now, if you do that on your highest setting, it is a guarantee that as soon as you turn to your lowest setting, your eye relief is going to be perfect, okay? So what this does is it sets the eye relief at the highest power, because typically you're not going to be shooting with it on 9 power all the time, okay? But it gets the eye relief at that highest power set to where you're not having to really strain up there to get into the scope. Because when I get behind a weapon and I get in there, I want to be able to, with my eyes closed, get into the rifle, get it into my shoulder, get my cheek down there. And like I said, I do this with my eyes closed, because when I get comfortable, I should be able to open my eyes up and I'm looking right through the scope, okay? If that's not happening, there's a couple things you can do. One is you can get, I can't remember what the name of it is, but it's basically a bag that straps around the buttstock, and it has a cheek riser in it, so it'll raise your face up. You can adjust those. So typically it's like a roll of foam, and you just unroll it until it fits comfortably, and that's it. The other thing you can do is you can change the height of your rings. I would start with the bag because it's cheaper. You can use anything. You can take old memory foam and you can start stacking that on there, and then you can take some moleskin. It's kind of like first aid duct tape, and you can tape that down with that moleskin, and it's got a kind of a cloth feeling outside and a very sticky adhesive inside, and that way when it touches your face, I mean, it's not like putting duct tape up against your face. It's got a nice cloth feel to it. But anyway, that's a way to adjust the height of the comb of the stock so your eye is right in there in that comfortable position. So I'm going to see if I can reposition the camera, and I'm going to just give you a example of how this should look. Hopefully it's not too awkward, but put the camera over here. Okay, I've got my rifle, all right? I'm going to get in behind this thing, and I'm going to get my face right down here, okay? And I'm going to close my eyes. I'm going to get comfortable, okay? Now, ideally, I don't want to have my neck strained way out, and I don't want to be all crunched back like this, okay? Right here is my comfortable position. And if I was shooting on a bench rest, this is exactly how I'd be. So I get down here, I close my eyes. I call it, you just get behind the gun and take a nap, okay? So I'm going to get in here. I'm going to lay down like I was taking a nap. With both eyes open, with minor adjustment of, you know, my head left to right, I should be able to look right through the scope, okay? Now what this does is it puts your body in a very comfortable, natural position, all right? And it allows your muscles to be at rest. The more that you strain your muscles, the faster they're going to fatigue and the quicker you're going to start shaking. And when you're shooting at longer ranges and you have your magnification turned up, your scope is much more apt to pick up what's called micro motion, okay? So any motion that is typically, you know, imperceptible to you, like let's say you're an older person and you tend to shake a little bit, you know, a lot of older people do that. It's not something that you're cognizant of because it's just normal for you. But you get it behind the gun, you got it cranked up to 9 power, you're going to see that micro motion, okay? So the more comfortable that you can be behind your scope and the less muscle force you're having to use to hold that thing in place, the less micro motion you're going to have and the more accurate your shooting is going to be, all right? A couple other things, just kind of as a side note, that I've learned about shooting with optics. Try to get comfortable shooting at the lowest possible power, okay? If I am trying to sight a rifle in and I'm shooting at 100 yards and I crank that baby up to 9 or 14 or whatever, because that target is so close comparatively, I'm going to notice a lot more micro motion even if I'm trying to hold real still. But if I turn it down to say 3 power, or I go down, you know, to 2 or 1 power and I take my shots, the micro motion, I'm not going to notice it, if at all. Because of that, I have found that shooting it, you know, even out to 200 yards, I am able to shoot more consistently with a red dot or a 4 power scope than I am with the scope that's cranked, you know, up to 11, just because of that micro motion stuff. So anyway, just to kind of go back over things, hit some high points. When you put your scope on, do everything you can to make sure that the front objective, the bell out in the front, is not touching anything. Okay, you don't want it touching the barrel, you don't want it touching the mount, nothing. If you got to take and cut your mount down a little bit, do it. But do whatever you got to do to get that to work. Okay, spray paint fixes a lot of stuff. I don't do that here in the shop because I like people's stuff to look nice, but a coat of black Rust-Oleum fixes a lot of things. The other thing, when you go to set your eye relief, get behind a rifle, take a nap, and, you know, open your eyes up, and without having to move your head around a bunch, you should be able to look right down the scope tube and have a good, clear picture. When you do that, you want to have it turned all the way up to the highest power, okay? Once you get that set, take care in making sure that the scope is leveled to the rifle. That was one thing I missed, so I'm going to go over this real quick. So now that I've got my rifle leveled and it's held securely in a vise, I'm going to take the top, sorry, I'm trying to get everything in view here. I'm going to take the top scope cap off and I'm going to set my level right on my turret, okay? Now my workbench isn't quite level right here, so it's, you know, it's not where it should be, but I'm going to take that scope cap off. I'm going to set that level right there on the turret. and I want that level. A little more accurate way to do this, a little more true way to do this, because on cheaper optics, not everything's lined up the way it should be. And even on some higher end ones, you know, sometimes some stuff just gets through quality control at the factory. The most accurate way to do this is to back off about 30 feet or so, 20 feet, hang a string line from your ceiling down, or take a level and draw a level line with a marker on the wall and aim your scope at that reference line, okay? Then you're gonna, I find this works best if I have my scope down, you know, about halfway up on the power, because it gives me the best picture. Take a flashlight, and I'm going to shine it through the end that I'm looking through, and that's going to project that crosshair on the wall. And I want to have it lined up with that string of my reference line, okay? My rifle's leveled on a vise, and I'm still trying to move my scope around to get a level. So I shine a light through it, and I can take and I can twist that scope until that reticle is lined up perfectly with that string line that's hanging, okay? So that is naturally just level to the earth, or the line that I've drawn with a level that I know is a level reference line. So what that does is it levels the scope to the rifle. And when I go to make my windage adjustments or my elevation adjustments, I then know that they are actually moving straight up and down, or as straight right and left as they possibly can. If you don't do that and your scope's canted or whatever, any adjustments you make are not only going to move right or left, but they're also going to move up and down, because now you're not moving straight this way, but it's like this. So when it's going to vector, okay? And we don't want it to vector. We want it to move straight up and down. So anyway, a little video about scope mounting there. Hope you found that helpful. If you guys have any wisdom you want to share with the group, please leave it in the comments. And like I always say, just keep it respectful. As long as we can have a respectful conversation, we can disagree about anything. So hope y'all have a good day. Stay warm. Get your snow shovel. Mask Gun Works. See you later.